Today, Theodore conducts his final cross-examination of Christjahn Beck, the Christian turned atheist agnostic. You'll be the trial jury. What will you decide? That's today, live on The View from a Pew.
Welcome to The View from a Pew, a conversation among Christians who are out to grow their faith by asking the simple questions, the tough questions, and the stuff you really wish your pastor would talk about. Come on now, let's reason together. It's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so join the conversation. Call 244-0077. That's 244-0077. Now, here's your host, J. Michael McCoy.
All right, welcome. Good afternoon. It is a beautiful day, and we thank you for being here. A couple of programming notes. Today, tomorrow, and Friday will be the last days that this program is heard from 3 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We have been fined so heavily because of Frank's blatant ignorance that we are being removed from the air.
Zippo for 3 o'clock.
No, you know why. We're changing our lineup. Michael Mudloff is now high noon. He's got the Paul Harvey spot. 1 o'clock will be Dr.
Michael
Brown, thank you. And then 2 o'clock will be Frank and I. And then 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock will be Steve Dace, back live in Afternoon Drive in his home market. So we're looking forward to that. And then 5 to 6 will be Hank the Bible Answer Man. Now that programming lineup changes next week. And then sometime in the next, I don't know. You know, there's no way to put a timetable on this because of weather. We have to crane. I'm not talking about the bird, Frank, the big machine,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
We have to crane 2 16-foot fiberglass satellite dishes. These are not those little mesh things or the little teeny like DirecTV. These are full-blown 16-foot fiberglass satellite dishes to the roof of the 6th floor of the Merle Hay Mall Tower. And so we have to put those on the roof. Well, you have to imagine it can't be windy because those satellite dishes will catch wind and they'll turn on you or they'll act like a parachute and they'll back up. And so we're waiting for the perfect day to do that. And then, but the studios are all picked out. Merle Hay Mall Towers, 6th floor. By the way, Frank, I do have to have you pass through a security test.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, every day.
So I guess I got to leave all weapons at home.
Yeah, you're gonna be patted down. Let me tell you.
Wanted to.
Wanded. You're gonna be wanded. That's right. And her name isn't Wanda, but you
Come
can act
on
like
now,
it is.
Wanda.
And so just to give you a programming note, next Monday everything will change. You'll probably mess up and you'll turn on the radio at 3 and you'll think, where's Mac? But you'll have Steve Dace to keep you company. And if you don't like listening to Steve Dace, that's not true. You love listening to Steve Dace. You may hate what he says and you may love to hate him. But Steve Dace, his unlikable numbers are very high, which means a lot of people who listen to him regularly don't agree with him. And that's what makes him clearly one of the best that ever hit this market. And he'll be live from 3 to 5 every afternoon. So that's happening on Monday, May 4th, this coming May. Now, Frank, have you gotten your May basket stuff picked out so you deliver May baskets on Thursday, Friday, sorry?
No, I don't.
Well, why not? It's a tradition. It's like the bunny at Easter and the reindeer at Christmas. You have to have May baskets.
That was true. In grade school, every Valentine's, you had to hand out Valentine's
That's right.
and May baskets in May.
And I noticed you missed giving me a Valentine card this year, and I want you to know it didn't go overlooked. So I will expect my May basket.
All right.
And I didn't get any chocolate bunnies from you at Easter either.
Well, we're going to have to talk to Tamara Scott because she's the chocolate queen.
She is?
Yes, she brings you all your chocolate I get
yeah,
into.
She does. Yeah, and then Frank eats it. I'm going to have luckily in my new office, there's a door.
He's going to put a lock on
And
his
a lock.
chocolate drawer.
Yeah, she brings me these homemade chocolates, and I get them in a day. They're in my drawer, my drawer.
Yep.
Jim, you can understand this. You have an office.
Right.
Theodore, you have an office.
Used to have an office.
Christian, do you have an office, something that's just yours?
I do not, but that's the life of a college student.
Well, I'm telling you, I have a drawer. That's all I have. I have a drawer. In my whole life, in my home, in all my businesses, I have one drawer, and that's here. And Frank thinks he can open it and eat my chocolate. And Ryan lets him. Ryan doesn't even play Barney and pull out the one bullet and nail him between the eyes.
I think he told me where it was at one day.
He probably did. In fact, maybe what happens is Ryan's stealing the chocolate and blaming you. All right.
Well, let's just get Tamara to bring us in a lot of chocolate.
Okay, well, fine. You talk to Tamara. I'm not in charge. She's not my Pillsbury Dough girl. You have to talk to her.
Okay.
All right, my special guests today are the affordable team of Jim Baehr and Theodore, and kind of a sad day. This won't be the last time you're on the radio, but you're going to be you're relocating.
I'm a resident of Texas, Mac.
Yeah, and you went Iowa, Texas, Iowa, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if you know this, but Theodore was a state legislator in the state of Texas. You were a Republican, weren't you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And he was also a top dollar lawyer. What were you, like $400 an hour?
Back then, no, we didn't charge that much then.
But what you charged, you were top. You got top fees. Don't give me that I'm humble look.
I made a good living.
Yeah.
Mac.
So his wife, who's a professor, she's done teaching at the end of this semester, and they've relocated to the great state of Texas. And so you'll be back from time to time.
I will.
And hopefully we'll know when you're coming back, and then we can have you back on the radio.
Let's hope we can get our schedules to work.
Yeah. Meanwhile, he's going to be coming to our small group, our men's Bible study, every Wednesday via FaceTime, right? FaceTime? Isn't that what it's called?
It's on your iPhone. I forget what it's called.
Yeah, I think it's called FaceTime. So, Christian, do you and your buddies, your godless friends, do you ever FaceTime?
I have about 2 friends that I use FaceTime with. So yeah, I can at least tell you that is what it's called. That's about the extent of my knowledge about
FaceTime.
it.
All right. Yeah. All right. Before we get going on the trial, I just want to ask a question. Anybody know the latest from Baltimore? They did have some people stay out past the curfew last night. Mm-hmm. They had several hundred arrested. I don't believe there was any more burning or looting last night. But as you said, interesting, first time in Major League Baseball history. What's happening right now?
So the Baltimore Orioles and the Chicago White Sox are in the middle of a game. It should be probably near the end of the game by now, that the public has not been allowed to attend. So there is a baseball game in Camden Yard, I believe it is, in Baltimore, that is completely empty of everybody but umpires and baseball players. So it is a bizarre and eerie scene out there. I was watching a little bit of it, and you can hear things that you would not expect to hear, and some of which are probably not appropriate for your average drive time listener.
Yeah, I wonder what it's like for the players. It's like practice, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's just like practice.
Yeah.
Remember when they did the football game years ago in the NFL? It was Monday Night Football game, and they did one without announcers. Are you too young to remember that?
I don't remember that. What I do remember
They
is,
also done a NASCAR race one time without announcers, if you remember that.
Yeah, that was bad too.
I'll say this. Let's see. I'll do a trivia for you guys. This has happened in minor league baseball. Do any of you know the time in minor league baseball history? It was in Iowa, where there was a baseball game without any public attendance. In Des Moines.
During the floods?
Cubs. Floods in 93.
Oh, really?
Floods in 93. There you go. Good job, Frank.
Good guess.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So, for the next 30 or 40 minutes, what do you hope to prove as a prosecutor?
Well, Mac, I'm not prosecuting. What we're trying to do is work towards the truth. I think Christjahn and I and Jim and Frank here all agree that...
You don't want to Frank.
Don't bring Frank into it.
You
Okay,
don't
Frank
wanna
doesn't
be
do that.
No.
Just the rest of us.
No.
We are all searching for the truth, and the way you can do that is by putting on evidence and discussing the evidence that you think supports the case that you want to make. So the case we're making is a case for the Creator. And what we discussed last time would be, what would you do if you were putting on your case to prove by beyond a reasonable doubt that there is a Creator? And last time, we brought up 2 types of evidence that we thought were very compelling that there is a Creator. The first one we called the cause and effect argument, and that is that nature proves that cause and effect is just a natural materialistic phenomena, and it's very difficult to conceive of a situation where you would come from absolute nothing to something. There has to be a cause. The second thing that we discussed as evidence we would put on in our case for a creator was what I called the consistency argument. And that is, so much of what we have in our earth, in the universe, is very consistent. The sun comes up every day. I wake up in the morning and my furniture is not on the ceiling because gravity shows up every day. The electrons in the atoms in my body show up every day and rotate so that I can continue to survive and to live. And this amazing consistency argues in favor of a creator. There are two other points that I wanted to bring up today, subject to the rest of the group being willing to do that. And the third proof or evidence I would put on is really just about the enormity and the complexity of the universe. This month is the 25th anniversary of the Hubble telescope. And I don't know if you all have had time to see some of the images that have been coming across the internet, but they're absolutely breathtaking. And they are talking now that they consider that we have about 100 billion stars just in the Milky Way. Just in the Milky Way. And then if you go out into the galaxy, all of the other galaxies that are out there, and just the sheer size and magnitude of that, I think, argues in favor of something that didn't just happen, that there had to be some intelligent design or creator. The final thing that I would like to point out, I think if I was putting on a case for creation, is that the odds against there being spontaneous life, that life somehow was generated out of a random set of chemicals and turned into life as we know it. And what I would do is I would put on some experts who talk about the sheer impossibility of life just generating spontaneously. So those are the things I'd like to talk about. I think it's all interesting, and I think when you get into this, you get into some really interesting books. And by the way, Mac, I want to tell you something. By doing this show with you, I have been led to an author who reminds me a lot of me and you, Christjahn.
Uh-oh.
And his name is Lee Strobel.
Sure.
I'm sure you've heard of him.
Yeah.
And Lee,
Case for Christ.
Lee is about the same age as myself. And he said that when he was really young, he had this insatiable hunger for understanding how everything works. And so one time his parents gave him a railroad train, and he went out into the garage and started throwing it onto the floor of the garage. And his dad came out and said, "What are you doing with that railroad train?" And Lee said, "Well, because I want to know how it works. I want to break it open and see how it works." Well, gang, guess what? I did the same thing when I was a kid.
Really?
We didn't have much money, but my dad finally got my mom one of those little push vacuum things to clean up the crumbs, because by then we had 3 kids in our family. And we were all kind of scrunched together. She was constantly cleaning up after us. So my dad bought her one of these push vacuum things.
You didn't plug them in.
So, no,
Yeah.
this was manual.
Yeah.
So this thing comes into our house, and I'm looking at it, and I'm immediately thinking like Lee Strobel, how does that thing work? So I took it apart, and I lost the parts.
Oh,
And the only thing that saved me was when my dad came home, I went up and pled for mercy, and I said, "Dad, I think I've broken my mama's little heart." So I didn't get a spanking. But Lee Strobel reminds me of that. This is a guy with immense curiosity. He has written a lot about creation. As a matter of fact, I'm presently reading a book called The Case for a Creator. Lee is a graduate of the University of Missouri Journalism School. And by the way, they claim that they're the best in the country. And every time they say that, they say, "And yeah, Brad Pitt went here." I don't know if he graduated, but Brad Pitt went to the University of Missouri Journalism School, and then he went to Yale Law School. And then he was the chief of the legal division of the Chicago Tribune.
Brad Pitt?
No. Brad Pitt went to the University of Missouri.
Oh, Lee Strobel. I thought Brad Pitt is a lawyer.
No. Lee Strobel went to Yale Law School.
All right, there's your presentation, Christjahn. When you get back, you get to make the arguing point back to him. You are the jury, the listeners. 244-0077. 244-0077. If we don't get a quantitative number on the jury. We'll have to make it fair, and I'll decide.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Credit cards are like grandkids. They love you, sometimes get out of control, and it's fun to get a new one. Who can stop them from piling on?
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of Des Moines. At the end of the day, you can give these grandkids back, but you're stuck paying off bad credit card debt. We can help you put the fun back into using credit cards responsibly. Right, kids?
Yeah! If you need help getting credit cards off your back, call Consumer Credit of Des Moines.
Hey, psst. Let me let you in on a little secret. You ready? Always try to do business with people, not places. Especially if you seek honest Christian business people. And when it comes to my car, I really need to trust who's working on it. Now, my family is so blessed. A few years ago, we found a family-owned automobile repair shop that operates as a Christian business also. Open, honest, reliable, trustworthy. It's AMCO on Hickman Road in front of Kmart. And it's a family-owned Christian operating business. This family treats your car as if it was their car. Everything from oil changes to transmission repair and everything in between. So the next time you feel the need to be at peace with your choice of who you can trust with your car, give AMCO on Hickman a chance to serve you. And tell them Max sent you.
If you sit in the back pew or the front pew, it's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so call 244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
All right, 21 minutes after the hour. Welcome back. It is the case for the creator. It is Theodore, the accomplished lawyer, legislator, businessman, and now future student, or are you a student at Dallas Theological?
I'm hoping to be a future student.
Hoping to be a future.
Yes.
You haven't been accepted yet?
No, I haven't applied yet.
Oh, you haven't applied?
No.
Why not?
Because I've been too busy winding down.
Oh, okay. If you need a like a letter of reference,
Right.
on your personally from someone to vouch for you, to tell people how wonderful you are, somebody who's really smart and knows their theology, they're a theologist.
Yeah, theologist.
They're Romanian. No, not Romanian. They're what was it?
Romarian.
Romarians. Yeah. You're
People
the
who
first.
knows Romans.
You're the first Romarian there's ever been. But anyway, if you need somebody of that caliber to write you,
A recommendation letter?
yeah, Jim, not Frank. Christian would probably write you a good letter.
Yeah, he would.
He'd
I'm
probably
sure he
write you a
would,
good
yeah.
letter. All right, so Christian, he made a presentation on his case for the existence of a creator. The floor is yours.
Alrighty. So again, we've covered a lot of ground there in a few short minutes. So I think one thing that's important to do is just kind of pick one of these and go through them one at a time. It's kind of difficult to sit here because refuting some of these things takes a lot longer than making an assertion. So that's a problem on my side, but I'll do the best that I can. So one of the problems, I think, to start off with, the first thing that I'll talk about is this problem that it is incredibly unlikely that the universe could have come into being the way that it is. That it is seemingly impossible. That it's so highly improbable that it was, for all intents and purposes, impossible for it to become the way it is today, based on sheer chance. So there's a problem in the logic there. There's a problem in the reasoning, and that is we are situated in the universe the way that it is today, and by just kind of by virtue of being in that position, we kind of have this assumption that it must have been marching towards this. It must have been intentional. There's some kind of causation that was leading to what we see today. We can't. There's no way to get an odds number. There's no way to get an appropriate measure of the likelihood that the universe would end up the way that it is today, because it's all we know. We have nothing to measure it against. So to say that would be like me saying, walking out onto Walnut Street here in Des Moines and seeing a car with a license plate that's 126 XQR and saying, oh my gosh, what is the chance that I would walk out of this studio today and that's the number that I would see? Well, if you're guessing ahead of time what the license plate number is that you're going to see outside, that it's incredibly unlikely. If it's just what has happened, then looking back on it and trying to place odds on something that's already happened is not logical. There's by virtue of our position, there's simply no way we can get a good number on that. We can look at some of these constants, and we can look at some of the physical laws of nature, and we can say, well, if this were to change this much, life wouldn't exist. If this were to change this much, life wouldn't exist. But even that, we have no way of really knowing that. Life as we know it today might not exist. Maybe life wouldn't exist at all. But I think there's this anthropocentric assumption that we are the inevitable thing, that God's creation from your end, or evolution, and there's a lot of atheists that I have to talk to about this, is one continuous march towards us as the purpose. And I think that's a very anthropocentric way of looking at things. And it leads to some logical errors, such as saying, well, if things were to change, or what is the chance that life could come into being the way that it is today, when there's so many unlikely things that had to happen for it to be this way? Well, that may be, but unlikely things happen all the time. Like you said, it's a huge universe. It's a huge, huge universe. Unlikely, seemingly impossible things happen all the time. And given a large enough sample size, those things are bound to happen. The law of probability suggests that they have to happen. To be one of the results of that, and to look back as if it was somehow a progressive march forward, leads us to a conclusion. That's what the human brain does, is it detects patterns. When we see something that unlikely, we think there must be a cause. If you're walking alone on a country road, nobody within a mile of you, and all of a sudden a rock falls out of the sky and hits you in the head, you think, okay, that was on purpose. Because we know that stuff like that doesn't just happen.
Is that the 30-man firing squad argument?
What do you mean?
Well, a guy's lined up to be shot by a firing squad. 30 men are aiming at him, and they all miss. So the guy says, well, it had to have happened because it happened.
Right.
So is that the argument you're making, that the universe had to have happened because it happened?
Not necessarily that it had to have happened because it happened, although that's something that we could talk about. What I'm saying is that it might not be logical to look back on it and assume intention. There might not be intent there, and it leads to problems of logic when you assume that. So going beyond that, we've got this argument for consistency, which we talked about somewhat last time, which is an inductive reasoning process where we say, well, because things have always been the way they are, they will always be that way. It seems to be that there's something governing that process, that there seems to be some kind of higher power, be it supernatural or otherwise, maintaining the order of things. I don't think that's true. I don't think we have the evidence necessarily make that claim. I think that's an assertion, and I think that there needs to be a lot more evidence built up on that to make the case that that's anything more than just an assertion, because I think we see all the time that things don't always stay the way they are. The earth will shake. Well, I shouldn't say the earth will shake beneath our feet. That's not exactly timely. And given what's happened in Nepal, I shouldn't make that analogy. But you understand what I mean. The idea that things are the way they are and that they're being governed that way, or a lot of people like to say that the planets are being held in orbit by some force. Well, yes, but that's something that we can talk about scientifically. That's something that we can explain scientifically. So I don't think necessarily the argument for consistency gets off the ground. We can talk about it more if you'd like to.
Yes. Do you agree with people like atheist philosophers, David Hume, Immanuel Kant? I think they both felt that what we're talking about is the teleological design argument, right? That they were not believing in the existence of God, but they still said we cannot get around that.
Right.
They both agreed that was a very strong argument.
Yeah, I think it is, and it's been recycled in a lot of different ways. Aquinas did it. Augustine talks about a lot about this. There's the Islamic version is the Kalam cosmological argument. They're all essentially somewhat teleological arguments for existence or arguments for design. And they are compelling arguments because it appeals to our common sense. It appeals to our common understanding that something exists. The way that we understand the world around us is that we see things that exist having been caused to exist, either through reproduction if it's nature, or through manufacturing if it's something that's being done by humans. We follow a chain of causation, so it appeals to our common sense. One of the things we know from science, though, and this is one of the reasons this is so difficult to talk about in short snippets, is that common sense is common for a reason, and it doesn't necessarily apply across the board. It's very useful, but it doesn't necessarily do well scientifically in explaining the world around us. I mean, we are very easily tricked. We see the world in a way that is useful to us. We don't even necessarily see the world the way that it actually is, and that's something that's very, just talking to people about the idea that color is not a physical thing, that's a mental thing that our brains do to make sense of the world around us. Common sense falls apart pretty quickly. It's very useful in human day-to-day lives, and it makes for an incredibly compelling argument when you talk about the teleological argument or the argument for existence. But it does not necessarily mean that at the end of the day that it's something that we can talk about with any kind of absolute understanding.
PBS has been broadcasting some shows here the last week of the Hubble telescope that Ted was talking about during the break. And most of the astronomers, I would say it's split more towards discovered, but they're talking about the mathematic absolutes of the universe. And most of the astronomers are siding up on this side of they're discovering this because it's a given, as opposed to learned, as learning something from whole cloth. So even the people who are studying the stars are telling us that this is just natural. We're discovering something that's an absolute that's already there, as opposed to us making this up.
Okay, that would seem to support my position.
Well, in other words, there's 24 hours to each day, 365 days to a year, 366, or a lunar year, I guess maybe 360 days. But in other words, God's not against science and mathematics. He created them both. So, but then out of this science and mathematics, there's free will or choice, things that can't be explained. In other words, miracles can't be explained. God can create something, and he himself can walk in and out of those bounds. He's not limited to the laws that govern this place. So if he sends angels at lightning speed that goes faster than the speed of light, that's his prerogative because he's sovereign.
So it's an interesting theological point. I'm not sure what you think that does to my argument, or even to what the astronomers were talking about. Because if the astronomers are saying this is something they've discovered, if these are laws that have been created but can be violated by choice at God's will, then there's really no point in understanding.
Well, what they're saying is mathematical certainty eliminates chance. Is basically what I'm gleaning from the argument.
I'm not an astronomer, so this is something that I would have to check with them, and I don't know that I'm comfortable trying to argue a position that I'm just simply not either qualified or versed in. No pun intended from the verse over there. So I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't.
Don't.
He's in the verse. He's in the verse chair today.
I know.
But Chris, what about chance? I mean, chance has no being. It has no will, no volition. Are you saying that there is such a thing in existence as chance?
As chance? Yeah, I think. So this idea of chance is something that gets misused a lot, I think, because I think it gets... People commonly understand it. Let's take natural selection, for example. People talk about evolution, when people who disagree with evolution talk about evolution by saying things like so-and-so could not just come about by cold random chance, just sterile chance could not have led to the beauty we see in the world. But I think that's a misunderstanding of what chance is.
Can we define chance as not having any being? We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, thank you very much. Jim Baehr is here along with Theodore. Theodore, when we come back, you get to cross-examine. Now, remember, you guys are down to less than 20 minutes on the air.
Man, time flies.
And then I get to call the jury up. If you want to be on the jury, make sure you call me or Facebook me or write me. Your voice comes up next.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner of Service Legends, and my position is Chief Talent Officer.
I'm Nicholas Wonderscheid.
I am Bernie Hobbs.
And I'm the Service Manager.
Marketing Director and Client Relations Manager.
Everything that we do is about ensuring that we exceed your expectations.
Our clients are important to us. 100% satisfaction.
We're not just focused on heating and cooling. That's the easiest part of our job, actually, is fixing furnaces and air conditioners.
Everyone that we come in touch with, we want to improve lives.
Bottom line is, we've got our installation guarantees, 25% energy savings guarantee, comfort guarantee, temperature selection guarantee, property protection guarantee.
100% satisfaction guaranteed. Fixed rate or it's free.
All of those guarantees are backed up with a 100% money-back guarantee to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that you get what you're after.
Just fix them problem today. If they have another problem 5 days down the road, it's still fixed rate or it's free.
We use what's called straightforward pricing. Our technicians are going to give you an exact to-the-penny price on what it's going to take before they move forward with any repair. That way you know what to expect.
It's the same price every day.
No surprises.
If you get off work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you come home, you realize that, oh, my furnace is broken. Now you need to call somebody out that night. You shouldn't have to pay more for that.
We're guaranteeing service 24/7.
We run afternoons, evenings, nights, weekends. We're staffed to work that.
Phone rings at 3 in the morning. You'll get one of our representatives answering the phone every time.
We're not sending you out to Timbuktu in some call center. It's our Service Legend team members, our mission control team.
I'll take a call anytime.
And then they answer the phones the same way during the day as they do at night.
It's a great day at your service company. How can we make you smile?
That's the only way to provide true 24-hour service.
When you're able to let somebody actually live in their home safely when they weren't able to do that before, where they don't have to stay up at night and worry about, is the heat going to come back on? Are we going to freeze the pipes? Is the baby in the room next door going to be sick because they got too cold? When you're able to help somebody overcome challenges like that, that's impacting a life. That makes a difference. I get goosebumps thinking about it.
I love the team. I love the people that I work with.
We have fun, but we work hard.
I call them my ambassadors of legendary service. If you could just envision what that is, that's who we're sending to your home.
They literally will call in, pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I want to talk to your manager. And I get on the phone, they're like, that technician that was at my house was the greatest technician ever. That's cool to me.
We want to brighten people's days.
Every person that we have going into the house has gone through an extensive background check.
Drug testing, we have a very thorough interview process that 1 out of 140 people make it through.
If we promise you something, that's what you're going to get, no matter what.
We're here when you need us to protect the safety and comfort of your family.
If you're not happy, we're going to make it right.
If we're willing to put 100% money back guarantee on what we do, what type of work do you think we do?
Give us a call. We're there for you 24/7, 365 days a year.
Enough said.
If you sit in the back pew or the front pew, it's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so call 244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
Sorry about that. 22 minutes before the top of the hour, Salem Radio Network News, and then Michael Mudloff. Let's get right to Jim's question that you were talking about before we went to break.
Well, I just wanted to define chance, because I think a lot of people think that chance has got some type of force or intellect or ability to change things or even create the universe. It's been said by some people that they think the universe came into being by chance. But chance has no ontological being. In other words, it has no being, no mind to change anything. And I think a lot of times when we don't come up with an answer, we don't have the answer on the origins of the universe, we just default to chance. So I just want...
Yeah, I think I agree. I agree with you. But I think the idea that that there's nothing so I guess I would have to divide this a little bit, because I think you're right that there's no mind or there's no force to it, but that's not to say that it's random. So
well, isn't chance basically mathematical odds? That's
to
all
a certain extent,
chance
but it
really is by definition.
But
so.
it still can be guided. I mean, it's not necessarily
And
guided.
Who's guiding that?
Well, that's where we can get it. That's where we can get into the scientific understanding, which is to say, if you've got 1,000 creatures sitting in existing somewhere, 1,000 different mutations, the most helpful, or not necessarily the most helpful, I think that's another misunderstanding, but the helpful ones will survive.
Yeah.
And the ones that are harmful will not. So random chance, just total randomness on a large enough sample size, can lead to a guided process in and of itself. So the idea that within one particular instance, chance, the way that we're talking about it, can be totally random.
So you're back to mathematical odds,
yes.
right?
Well, yes.
You roll
to a
the
certain
dice so
extent.
many times.
Right.
It's going to eventually maybe come up.
But that's not to say that any random thing can happen. I mean, there's natural laws that these things work within, and combined, those natural laws, the parameters of those natural laws combined with chance can lead to a guided process.
Well, and the problem, I think we were talking about evolution. Darwin wrote a book on the origins of species, and he wasn't just talking about mutations. Christians believe that there are mutations, there are changes in the creation. But Darwin taught, or had a book on the origins of species, and so he was saying it just came out of nothing. It started with that single cell.
Are you talking about the first life, or are you talking about speciation?
Yeah, just the argument that the tree of life that he talks about is where everything, animals, fish, people, all came out of the same cell.
Okay, so...
but he can't tell you where it all started. It just started from the
abiogenesis.
Swamp, so
we have
speak.
to separate Darwin from abiogenesis, because Darwin did not write about abiogenesis, which is the beginning of life. Darwin did not make a claim about the beginning of life. He didn't know. We still don't know.
Yeah.
We still don't know. What Darwin was talking about was the process of speciation itself, about the origin of the various species we see on the planet. So those are two very different things in two very different fields of research. It's an ongoing field of research, and I hope that it's something that we can speak intelligently about within my lifetime.
Would you lean
but we'll
toward
see.
that? Would you lean toward evolution then?
To explain the origin of life?
Yeah.
I believe that there's something similar to an evolutionary process, but again, evolution deals with from the first piece of life, how we got to where we are today.
Yeah.
Evolution itself does not explain that first piece of life.
I think
it's not a theory on
I think
that.
the interesting point is, if you want to say everybody, all animals and people are from the same cell, it's interesting that only human beings have a garment industry, that they're the only ones that wear clothes, So it's kind of an interesting thought.
Well, and I don't want to quote him because he's not here, but Bob Montserrat once said on the air that the Darwin theory has been disproved by DNA. That when DNA was introduced in, 53 or whenever it was, and they discovered that every single living thing has a DNA, and if two are alike, that's impossible, and that they studied evolution of DNA, and it's not possible. Now, that's what Bob's a scientist,
So Francis Collins, who's an evangelical Christian, he headed up the Human Genome Project, and he's the current director of the National Institute of Health. Very outspoken evangelical Christian and author, very credible scientist, has also said that if the fossil record did not exist, DNA evidence alone would be enough to prove that evolution is true. And he's a very, very credible evangelical Christian and scientist who dealt directly in the science of human DNA.
Okay,
well, I think, again, the evolution...
Have him call me, because I can call Bob Montserrat.
All right.
He can come right here on the radio.
Let's get Bob in here.
Because I think, again, we have to be careful with that word evolution, because it's a very slippery word. Again, if it's talking about evolution as far as mutations and change in the creation, that's one thing. But if it's the origins of species, that's where...
Those are two different things.
Yeah, the word origin leaves
we're in
a
agreement there.
Misconception.
Right.
That he was really talking about that first cell.
The theory
how that came into existence.
Right.
And
the
that
theory
is
of
not
natural selection and evolution are separate. They do not speak to the origin of life.
Right.
And you did bring up one thing, and I do have to say what I've just been reading about some of the evidence that was given to support evolution, and I don't know if most people realize this, but the fossil record shows that back in about 540 million years ago, called the Cambrian period, there was an explosion of phyla.
Precambrian explosion. Yeah.
Phylum, it means a classification of animals, which is inconsistent with this sort of slow mutation into things that became birds and reptiles and that sort of thing.
I don't think it is. So this is, well, for one thing, this is what my girlfriend does. Is she's a biologist, and we've talked a lot about some of this stuff, but I'm certainly not an expert on it. So there are biologists out there who are researching specifically this area. That era, which I believe it's the Burgess Shale in Canada, is the best access we have to some of this. It does present some problems for the theory of evolution. But at the same time, there are no credible evolutionary biologists who believe that it has disproven evolution. So there are some issues there. But with any theory, you've got exceptions and you've got things that have to be worked out. So I think it's a misunderstanding to say, well, there's this one. And similarly, this happens with apologetics. There's a footprint site, I believe it's in Mississippi. I think there's also another one in Canada where people say, well, look, here we have example of humans and dinosaurs coexisting. And those, for the most part, have been disproven. They've been debunked. So I think you have to be careful to make a distinction between an area of the particular field of science where there's ongoing research, and you're right that there is ongoing research about the Cambrian era, always ongoing research. You have to be careful not to make the mistake of thinking that because there are still issues that are being worked out, that the whole thing needs to be thrown out. Because we could do that with gravity. We could say, well, gravity falls apart at the quantum level, so let's get rid of this whole theory of gravity. And I think it would be a mistake to do that. Yeah.
Well, let me commend to the listeners and to you a gentleman by the name of Jonathan Wells, who is a PhD in molecular biology, and he's written quite extensively on the fossil record and some of these issues that we're talking about here today. And he's a scientist. And he's someone who has looked at this and is very, very much convinced that it's virtually impossible for life to, first of all, come from just chemicals to that first original cell, and then to go from that one cell into what we saw happen in the Cambrian area. He just says it's against it.
All right, so everybody has experts on both sides. And everybody says it's one way or the other way. Now, you understand, and we're going to go for a break here for a minute, but you guys understand that as soon as we prove that evolution is not how man came, the theory of creation is evident. And so that's why they're going to throw every scientist at us, because that's the big one.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Well,
so,
we're not going to prove it, Mac, but we're going to put enough evidence to
I think DNA proves it. I don't know where we can go beyond DNA. All right, let's take our last break. We're coming back.
Credit cards are like grandkids. They love you, sometimes get out of control, and it's fun to get a new one. Who can stop them from piling on?
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of Des Moines. At the end of the day, you can return the grandkids, but you're stuck paying off bad credit card debt. We'll help you put the fun back into using credit cards responsibly. Right, kids?
Yeah! If you need help getting credit cards off your back, call Consumer Credit of Des Moines.
Hey, psst. Let me let you in on a little secret. You ready? Always try to do business with people, not places. Especially if you seek honest Christian business people. And when it comes to my car, I really need to trust who's working on it. Now, my family is so blessed. A few years ago, we found a family-owned automobile repair shop that operates as a Christian business also. Open, honest, reliable, trustworthy. It's AMCO on Hickman Road in front of Kmart, and it's a family-owned Christian operating business. This family treats your car as if it was their car. Everything from oil changes to transmission repair and everything in between. So the next time you feel the need to be at peace with your choice of who you can trust with your car, give AMCO on Hickman a chance to serve you. And tell them Max sent you.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
If you sit in the back pew or the front pew, it's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so call 244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
All right, right to Theo as we come with, what would you call them? Closing arguments.
Closing arguments. Well, Mac, again, we appreciate the opportunity to come here and seek truth, and that's what you do in a courtroom. And the courtroom that we have today is the people in this room and our audience. And I wanted to let them know that from our vantage point, those of us that argue in favor of a creator, that there are 4 very good arguments that I think would be appealing to a jury if given this evidence. Several of them are self-proving evidence, and those are the kinds of things that on their face, they are so appealing that a juror would just say, yes, I get that, I understand that. First of all, we've put on the argument that you can't have something come from nothing. There has to be an original cause in order to have an effect. And then this effect that we see is so large, so huge, so complex, that for us to think of all of that happening, and yet our existence, this world, being able to exist within all of that complexity, defies explanation other than through a creator. The other thing is the consistency that we have seen in this huge universe that we have, and the fact that that gravity shows up every day, and that rain tends to come down every time instead of going up. And although sometimes it does in a tornado, I know that. And that's the other thing, Christian. There are always anomalies. Matter of fact, that's a given, that there will be anomalies to what we consider to be the normal consistency of nature. But yet, in spite of those anomalies, things happen pretty much the same way every day, day after day, and that has allowed this Earth to continue on, and our population, our species, to continue. If you look at the science, it is virtually impossible for life to be spontaneous, to self-generate out of chemicals. We have no proof by anyone ever that life was generated from just a chemical base. And the example that was used years ago by it's even quoted in textbooks about called the Miller experiment. and this guy ran an electrical charge through what they thought was the original atmosphere. And turns out they had the wrong atmosphere, and even if they had, this thing wouldn't have worked. And even if you had generated something like a protein or amoeba, the probability of that being put in the right place at the right time in the right amounts and keeping all the bad stuff out is virtually impossible. And with those kinds of arguments, I would say to a jury, ladies and gentlemen, do you find beyond a reasonable doubt that given all these proofs that there is probably a creator or intelligent design? And then basically I'd say I think the evidence is overwhelming. And I would sit down and then I'd say, Mr. Christjahn, it's now your opportunity to make your statement after I maybe
Well, if I can
pass it
say one
to
more
Jim.
thing, I just want to acknowledge on both sides of this argument, there is great intelligence. I mean, I think we have to acknowledge on both sides, there are tremendous philosophers and theologians over time. But I think what it really comes down to is a moral argument. And we can talk about that next time.
Well, just let me get in here real quick. It's a matter of faith, because the Bible, for example, doesn't prove itself. God in the Bible is a given. I think we'd all agree to that. So it's a matter of the person who's coming and reading those words. It's a faith thing. You either believe it or you don't. There's no way to prove it.
Christian.
That's a perfect lead-in, Frank. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Frank.
So
I told you never bring up the Bible.
So we started off last time I was here talking about the standards of evidence. Ted you make a lot of good points. You talk about a lot of things that are very difficult to explain. I'm certainly not a scientist who can explain them. I think the problem is that these problems, these same problems that you're accusing the scientific field of falling short of explaining, apply to you, apply to the opposing side as well. Excuse me. The problem of not having evidence for the origin of chemical life, we lack a similar evidence that God has done it. We haven't seen that happen. The same problem is there. Explaining the seeming improbability of the universe. That is that if you say that that's a problem, which some scientists would say it's not necessarily a problem, but if you say that that's a problem, it's a problem that both sides have to answer, and neither side seemingly has an adequate answer. And I would say that there's a better scientific answer. Evolution, I think, is an entirely different area. But I think what you're talking about here is you're appealing to. When you talk about standards of evidence, essentially what you're doing is you're doing what's called begging the question, which is to say you're incorporating your conclusion into your arguments as a way of making it, which is so that people say begging the question all the time, and very few people use it in its appropriate context these days. But you can't use the existence of God as part of your evidence to prove the existence of God. So when you're making these arguments here, when you make an argument for fine-tuning, or when you make an argument for the origin, you run into a problem, an infinite regress problem, which is to say, well, who created those things? So when you beg the question, you assume that God is a possible explanation for this without demonstrating that it's even that it's possible at all. So I think what ends up happening is you end up making not a beyond a reasonable doubt case, but you rely on the person listening, the jury, to infer what you're saying. You rely on them to make one inference further than you're willing to say while making your case, and that's a perfect example of a circumstantial case.
Are you saying that Ted was making circular reasoning then by assuming God in the arguments?
To a certain extent, but I don't
think he ever said God. I think he was just arguing for...
But a creator.
Intelligent designer.
Which would be God, right.
All right, as the judge and jury in this...
I have a feeling I know how this is going to go.
I am ready to make a... Excuse me?
He's strapping me to a gurney, folks.
Bailiff's got a note for me. The bailiff has a note. Excuse me, just a minute.
Belt's tightening.
Well, we have a surprise witness that wants to give testimony, and Theodore, he says you have to come back sometime because he wants to give that testimony in front of you.
Oh, really?
So we'll have to postpone the conclusion of this trial.
A continuance
until stay of execution.
Theodore can come back again. So we'll just have to find a time when you can come back again, and you're going to be up here, and then we'll have to do this again.
and then we'll finish up this this surprise witness.
Yeah, we have a surprise witness. So, oh my. And boy, are you going to be surprised, Chrisjahn. Wow. Boy, this is, what do they call this? The smoking gun?
The smoking gun.
Yeah, we have, it's kind of like the butler admitted it. Yeah. So we'll postpone the conclusion of this till our surprise witness can join us. Until then, I sure thank all of you for coming in. Chrisjahn, I look forward to having you on. We're done with April, so we'll have to book a time in May. Jim, I hope you come back for that.
Will do.
Frank? Oh, well, never mind. Ryan, thanks for being here. I'm J. Michael McCoy. If I haven't told you lately, thanks for listening. Love this job. Couldn't do it without you. Tonight, you know what I'm going to ask? Have you done it yet? Have you done it? Have you done it? Have you done it? Have you done it? Then I'm going to keep asking tonight on your knees. Give forgiveness. And that's how you shall be forgiven. See you in church.